Okay, so I'm actually kind of starting this video at the end of my day today, and I did a little painting, didn't really make a whole lot of progress, but figured I could give an update at least. I did end up cleaning everything underneath. That was all underneath the truck. A lot of rust and all this stuff falls off. Hopefully now that it's all painted and cleaned up, I won't have to deal with that as much when I'm working on it. So I did have an issue today. Well, first I should say that I did go buy some bolts. So I bought all new bolts for the lower control arms. These things are actually kind of expensive locally. This was one of the bolts. I ended up cutting it, or I was starting to cut through it. One of them I ended up completely cutting off into like 3 pieces. This one I started to cut, so I ended up just getting 4 new ones so I could replace all of the lower bolts on the lower control arms. I did get the kit with the lower control arms. It has the tie rod ends and all that stuff, as I mentioned earlier, but it was actually missing the passenger side arm. So I messaged them. So I messaged the company on eBay. We'll see what they do about that. Hopefully they'll just like ship me the other arm. What was actually listed on the kit, this 8710 number, is the one that was missing. So I was kind of looking forward to starting to put this stuff together today. And then when I realized that, it kind of put me behind a little bit. And then I just decided, instead of trying to throw this stuff together, I'll wait for that, clean underneath the truck, so it's not such a nightmare underneath everything. But I did go through and get everything painted. So I got both of the towers gusseted and painted. And I also did some work on the inside here. So while I was painting the towers and everything, I decided to paint the firewall. I did trim out some more of the fenders here because I did have that kind of really janky before, and I just had it like cut and bent backwards. So I kind of did what I could here to clean up this trim a little bit and cut it back underneath the fuse box without removing the section under the fuse box. And I just kind of rounded this section off here and then made it, you know, kind of flat. I did rip off the wire harness here. Everything was kind of bolted up onto the back side of this. This harness comes over from the driver's side over the front over to the passenger side and then back to like the heater blower box where all that stuff was. So I ripped that all down. I'm gonna go through and unloom the wiring, kind of clean that up, just keep what I need. And then I'm also gonna be working on cutting the front section of this off. I would like to keep probably from the section that's bolted on here in this whole section where it is, so it doesn't misalign the fenders. And I'd like to have a bolt-in removable section for this whole thing here. That should help me just to be able to work on it a little bit easier. I like to be able to just kind of raise the engine up a little bit and slide it back instead of having to raise everything up so high. And then what that should allow me to do is be able to remove the engine and transmission easily at the same time. Because this depth of this opening is not very deep. So if you try to lift it out with the engine and transmission together, it would be at like a super steep angle and it basically doesn't work. So that's why I want to have that little middle section removable, then I can just slide everything in. I did remove the mounts that I made, the engine mounts that I made. I removed those guys, and then I think what I'm going to do is end up welding some standoffs off of this, and then I'm going to do probably like a single bolt style mount. Like on the Mustang, the K-member that I had, it's just a single bolt. So you have your section that bolts to the engine, section that comes off the frame, and then you can lower it and just put a single bolt through to get everything mounted. These were the mounts that I had on there. These are on there for like 4 years. These are really kind of ghetto. What I did was I took the Ford mount, and then I took the GM mount, and I cut the urethane stuff off the GM mount, and then just kind of welded this stuff together. So there's just this little bead on the backside and a little piece of flat here. I mean, but they worked well for what I need. But we're gonna make that a little bit better. And what I wanna do is the single bolt style, because that was kind of tough to deal with when I would lower the engine down and try to get the bolt holes lined up in the block and thread the bolts. It was kind of frustrating. So I wanna just try to make this stuff as easy as possible to work on. So that's kind of why I really cut out the sides and all that stuff too. Another thing I did was on this section down here, I ended up removing the differential mount. So that was actually, basically this section here was up against the frame. So I was losing a good almost 4 inches sticking out there. So that was kind of a pain to deal with when I was running an exhaust down through there. Not having that there should really open up some room on the insides of the frame rails, like if I decided I wanted to do a full exhaust from the twins inside the rail. So that might still be an option, debating if I want to go back with the exhaust or just do like exhaust out the bumper. There is some pros and cons to each. Like Doing it up front would be really easy and just shoot them out the sides. But then you're kind of dealing with exhaust smell and it's really loud and stuff. And if I do want to spend a lot of time driving the truck, like long distances, it can get kind of annoying having to deal with it being that loud for a long time. And even other stuff like dealing with fumes coming in the cab, anything that's forward of the exhaust, even if you're driving, it does still come in the cab and it can get pretty shitty. I do have this power steering line, so this is a Ford line that is actually, I just bought this little section on and I crimped it. So I crimped the Ford line to a GM line, but when I crimped this thing, I kind of biffed the crimp a little bit, and it's hard to see, but the hose isn't fully seated all the way to the back of the fitting. So when I crimped it, I don't think it's fully sealed. So it did actually leak. When I would try to turn this thing like full lock, it would actually piss fluid out of this little hole. I want to redo that line, and I also have somewhere the Ford pressure reducer. There's like a little fitting that goes inside of it, or a little adapter that goes inside the pump, and it actually lowers the pressure from the GM pump to go through the Ford steering system. So hopefully that'll be enough to kind of eliminate that. Other than that, these spindles, I'm probably going to do like a little block off plate for the back of this spindle for where the CV axle was removed. This is a little like protector ring that was on here with couple bolts on it, so I might just remove this and try to make a plate so I don't get dust or anything inside there. Another option is to get a two-wheel drive spindle. Like I think the Ford Ranger Edge two-wheel drive spindles bolt right into here, but I'm not positive. It's kind of an odd situation because the two-wheel drive Rangers have a different spindle and control arm setup, but the two-wheel drive Ranger Edge has the torsion bar setup. So I think the torsion bar setup on the two-wheel drive Edge should work with the spindle, but I gotta verify that. I don't know if that's actually true. So I don't want to buy the stuff and then it's not right. So if you know, let me know if you have experience, or if you want to send me a picture on Facebook of what your two-wheel drive Ranger Edge spindles look like and control arms, let me know. So here's basically how the control arms should sit, ideally right inside this thing. Hopefully that works out. If not, I might just have to move it over a little bit depending how easily this comes over. I did raise the coil over up into the tower, so the top of the coil is actually really close to this. So if I turn it kind of too far sideways, it'll actually hit and bind right here. So I do have it coming down pretty darn close to that hole, so I just got to make sure that that's all going to work. It should work out pretty good because I did test fit everything and I had that bottom eyelet through the hole, so it should work decent, but I'm just anticipating that possibly being an issue, just so I can do some brainstorming and have a plan when I get there if it's a problem. I guess as long as we're still rambling. So I'm debating on cutting those things out. Those are basically where the torsion bar keys were before, and I also did use that as the transmission cross member. The issue that I have with it though is the opening is not wider than the transmission pan. So if I'm trying to get it in and out of there, it can be a little bit tricky trying to raise and lower the transmission because I got to make sure that the thing is far enough forward to fit inside this little back section of the pan. So if it's too wide, like the transmission here won't fit in between those arms. So if I don't have it positioned right, it's kind of a pain, and I have issues with it actually hitting the plug on the transmission, the electrical plug, and I've damaged the plug a couple times trying to get it in and out of there. So I might modify those guys by either making that wider because the torsion bar keys are not in there anymore, or just completely cutting them out and then do a full width cross member that I would just make that would bolt right to the frame. So I got a lot of options, guys. I can really do whatever I want with it, and I like the idea of how I'm kind of opening everything up, and I just want to open everything up as much as I can, make it easy to work on, especially if this thing is going to be treated as more of a race-oriented vehicle and more track time than street time. I don't want to be frustrated when I'm working on it all the time. So other than that, I guess I'll end it here. Just a quick rambling update for the night because I didn't really get a whole lot done. Let me know what you guys think. If you guys like the build, awesome.